A very good morning to you, and many thanks for joining us on yet another edition of Political Spectrum. We're coming to you live on Spectrum Television. I am Raymond Ita. Post-election reactions will of course continue to dominate discussions as always, but there are interesting angles building up across the country, especially in relation to the rumored efforts made by some quarters to deter a possible transition of power from one civilian administration to the other, after warnings were sounded by the Department of State Services, who claim they have uncovered plots to set aside the Constitution and install an interim government. And that's where, of course, we'll channel a bulk of our conversation this morning, where later on we'll be joined by the State Coordinator of Krania in Akwabam State, Franklin Song, to talk to us about the impending dangers of having an interim government in place post-President Muhammadu Buhari administration. Plus, the race for the Senate presidency is heating up as the 10th Assembly beckons. Who does the cap fit? All of that and more to come later. Let's start off with a regular roundup of the day's biggest political news stories and updates, and we'll begin with some disturbing report that the Department of State Services DSS says the plot to set aside the Constitution and install an interim government by misguided political actors is real. DSS spokesman Peter Afunaya, in a statement, vowed that the secret police will use all arsenals at its disposal to frustrate such a plot. But the secret police also said some key players in the plots for an interim government in Nigeria have been identified. But the DSS had on Saturday warned politicians to desist from peddling hate speech, as well as all forms of false narratives to ignite violence or pit the citizens against the current government of President Muhammadu Buhari, as well as the incoming administration of President-elect Bola Tinubu. Well, the DSS did not mention any politician, but said some key players have been identified in the interim government plots. Meanwhile, the Presidential Campaign Councils of the All Progressives Congress APC and the People's Democratic Party PDP have challenged the Department of State Services DSS following its latest warning to politicians. This is as the parties urged the DSS to get tough with the plotters of the interim national government. Now, the councils, in separate interviews with newsmen yesterday in Abuja, said the push for the interim national government was unconstitutional, adding that the plotters should be arrested, identified, and named. In a related development, the national coordinator of the Southwest Agenda for Asiwaju, Senator Adedayo Adeyeye, has described those calling for the annulment of the February 25 presidential election and the constitution of an interim national government as enemies of Nigeria. Senator Adeyeye's comment at a news conference comes on the back of calls from several aggrieved opposition politicians who have called on President Muhammadu Buhari to annul the presidential poll and set up an interim national government pending the conduct of a fresh election, because the recently concluded election was fraudulent in their views. Now, Senator Adeyeye said even before the primaries that the groups have been planning for an interim government, noting that part of the plan was to cause crisis by ensuring that even after the primaries there would be no election. Well, he further alleged that there were some people who he termed as enemies of Nigeria bent on causing anarchy with a view to returning Nigeria to the dark black days. He dismissed comparison with the June 12, 1993 scenario and said since the election had been won and lost, aggrieved persons should channel their approaches as well as go to the court and not resort to ripping the country apart. Elsewhere, the House of Representatives has summoned the Chief of Army Staff, Farouk Yahaya, and the Chief of Defense Staff, Lucky Rabo, over an alleged attack on a Benue lawmaker, Bam Sokbo. The resolution followed a motion moved by Mark Bieler yesterday. Now, in his motion, Bieler said that the soldiers had attacked the lawmaker alongside some other civilians during the governorship election on March 18. He further explained that the soldiers had stormed the Old Ban Hotel in Boko Local Government Council of Benue State and assaulted the said lawmaker and others. He also alleged that the same soldiers had killed 2 persons in an extrajudicial manner. Well, the House therefore summoned the security chiefs to brief the House on the allegations. Now, as a fallout from the just concluded elections, the Independent National Electoral Commission returning officer in the Abia State gubernatorial elections, Professor Nnenna Oti, has revealed how she was offered financial incentives to manipulate the election result. Recall that before Alex Oti was declared the governor-elect last Wednesday, a coalition of results for Obingwa local government area were briefly suspended by INEC, arousing tension amongst the electorate and stakeholders in the state. Well, Oti, who is the vice-chancellor of the Federal University of Technology, Owerri, made the revelation while being welcomed by the management, staff and students of the university. Well, she stated that before the final declaration of the results, she was promised huge monetary inducements to change the will and the mandate of the people of Abia State, but that she remained resolute in the face of heavy intimidation and threats. Well, she stated that she stood on her ideals and principles not to shortchange anyone and ensure that the will of the people of Abia prevailed and that their votes counted during the election. Elsewhere, the Progressives Government Forum have congratulated President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu on what he marked as his 71st birthday anniversary. In a congratulatory statement yesterday, Kebbi State Governor and Chairman of the PGF, Atiku Bagudu, said Tinubu's boldness and patriotism has been acknowledged by many Nigerians. Bagudu said the governors of the APC were confident in Tinubu's ability and proud of all that he had accomplished. Now, the statement read in part, quote, "This year's birthday is coming shortly after Nigerians have freely and enthusiastically mandated you to lead our country. Your patriotism, nationalism, boldness and courage have been acknowledged by the majority. It is, of course, a befitting birthday tribute that you are Nigeria's next president, and even while you're taking such a much-needed time to reflect on all that needs to be done, your vision of a Nigeria shall take its place of pride among the Committee of Nations and is resonating with all." A statement from Kebbi State Governor and Chairman of the APC Governors Forum, Governor Bagudu, yesterday. Let's wrap up with this update coming from the Minister of Labour and Employment, Chris Ngige, yesterday, who has urged the incoming administration of President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu to review the current minimum wage of 30,000 naira presently obtainable in the country. Well, Ngige noted that Nigeria's minimum wage should be reviewed every 5 years to match the current standard of living in the country. Well, speaking on a televised broadcast, the minister also said that he would add in his handover note that the talks surrounding the minimum wage should commence as soon as the new government is sworn in May 29, 2023. Well, Ngige further stated that it is a tripartite negotiation involving the public sector, the private sector, as well as the state government, pointing out that it is entrenched in the bill or law that the minimum wage will now have an automatic review every 5 years. He expressed optimism that from May 2023, the incoming administration will empanel the new minimum wage review committee for the nation. Some would argue, are these moves to perhaps stem the tide of a possible rebellion through a protest over issues that Nigerians feel largely dissatisfied with, especially the outcome of the just concluded general elections, which has led to speculations that there will be an annulment of the polls and the setting up of an interim government, claims and moves that have amounted to plots that have now seemingly been uncovered by the Department of State Services, who have warned that the plot to put in an interim government is actually real. So who are the faces behind these insinuations? When we come back, we'll talk more about this. Stay with us, Political Spectrum. We'll return. Business exists only to meet the needs of the people. But there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTime's DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
Every society is premised on the quality of relationships forged by its inhabitants. The health of these relationships determines how well people, relationships, organizations thrive and how long they stick together. Join Uyai Anyekan on Connect every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. and on Sunday 2:30 to 3 p.m. on Channel 421 on StarTimes to catch all the conversations, interviews, real stories and how to navigate relationships and family life in the 21st century. Real people, real faces, real stories. Connect live on Spectrum Television.
Nigerian police, which is the only one allowed by grossly abuse. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigerian police force, which shall be administered, organized and supervised by the Nigerian police force.
No, my lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My lord, the matters council is leading the evidence in our matters.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord, but we can't be talking about cases which are in court, my lord.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord. These cases are in court, my lord. I'm just reminding your lordship.
My lord, sorry, my lord, I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
One truth not often told is about the transformation that Africa has undergone in recent decades. Africa is shaping its own destiny and should be referred to as the African opportunity. On Spotlight Africa, we paint the African picture the African way, laced with truth, detail, and the color of the African continent. Join Uyai Anyekan every Tuesday and Thursdays at 4:30 p.m. Spotlight Africa, telling the African story.
Every day, we bring you up-to-date information on topical issues affecting the common Nigerian. From issues on politics,
Hello, Nigeria. I remain committed.
security, education, health, lifestyle, and so much more. Join Janice Kobum and Uyai Anyekan every weekday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. on Rise and Shine Daily, exclusive on Spectrum Television.
Every society is premised on the quality of relationships forged by its inhabitants. The health of these relationships determines how well people, relationships, organizations thrive and how long they stick together. Join Uyai Anyekan on Connect every Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. and on Sunday 2:30 to 3 p.m. on channel 421 on Star Times to catch all the conversations, interviews, real stories and how to navigate relationships and family life in the 21st century. Real people, real faces, real stories. Connect live on Spectrum Television.
Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. You're still watching Political Spectrum live on Spectrum Television. And just a quick reminder of the day's biggest story. The Department of State Services, DSS, says it has identified some unnamed misguided key players who are planning for an interim national government in the country. But the secret police disclosed this yesterday in a statement by its public relations officer, Peter Afunaya. They described the plan as an aberration and said it would undermine civil rule as well as plunge the country into avoidable crisis. So, who are those behind the plans to install an interim government which would see to setting aside the constitution of the country, which a lot of political observers have linked to the aftermath of the just concluded 2023 elections? Well, to help us get keener, deeper and better perspective of these issues, we're being joined virtually on the program by Franklin Asong. He's the Kwabam State Coordinator, Center for Human Rights Advocacy and Accountability Network, CRAN. He joins us live on the show this morning. Good morning, Franklin, and thanks for joining us yet again. Yes, if you can get me clearly, good morning to you once again, Franklin, and welcome to Political Spectrum.
Good morning, Raymond. Good to be with you this morning.
Thank you very much as well for joining us on the program. Very disturbing reports coming in this morning with insinuations making the rounds about plots to install an interim government in the country. This is courtesy of an information by the Department of State Services, DSS, in a statement released yesterday by Dr. Peter Afunaya, the PRO of the Secret Police. And he has said the plans to install an interim government is an aberration that would undermine civil rule in the country, as well as plunge Nigeria into an avoidable crisis. I'd like to start by asking, what was your reaction when you first heard about this report, considering for the obscene time, we're hearing about rumors of an interim national government in Nigeria. Do you even believe in the possibility of this ever happening? The last time it did was 30 years ago, following the cancellation of the June 12, 1993 elections. Is history about to repeat itself again?
Well, Raymond, I'm not surprised. I'm hearing the report, hearing the confirmation of the report from the Department of State Services. Before now, we've heard the rumors. We've even heard some persons being invited by the department for interrogations with regards to the insinuations. That is why we always advise politicians not to heat up the polity. That is why we always ask politicians to play by the rules and to always allow the spirit of sportsmanship to guide their utterances and activities during, before and after elections. Because after election, you still have the country. And if you burn the country, if you set the country ablaze because of your political ambition, you will have no country to call your own. So the report by the Department of State Services, for me, wasn't a surprise one. going by the body languages, the pronouncement and statement that had been made by politicians before, during, and after elections, one could agree. One could not agree less that there is such an intention by the selfish and those who believe that election is warfare instead of sports. So I think that the department coming out to make the statement yesterday, they must have gathered more than enough intelligence. And so what I would have thought is that the department would have, started inviting people for interactions, for engagement, for questioning. In doing so, they would have been able to, reassure the country that, the report or what they have confirmed has been, the service is on top of it. But coming out to just tell us that this is you are confirming what we already knew, what we already heard, and not telling us what you have done and what you intend to do, I think is not a better one for the country. The department in this press statement, fell short of even mentioning names of persons. So instead of mentioning the names, I would even thought that by now they would have begun to have engagement with stakeholders, engaging the political actors, engaging the media organizations, engaging the civil society groups. By now, at all across the states.
Well, it's interesting that you've said this. It's interesting that you've said this because there are some persons who feel that the DSS should have gone about this business of investigating the alleged plot to put in place an interim government discreetly without even having to come out to tell Nigerians. From the statement released by Dr. Peter Afunaya yesterday, he only claimed they have identified some names, but just stopped shy of mentioning those names. And then you have some person saying that is immaterial. That is immaterial. You don't need to come out to tell Nigerians about this. Just go about your business discreetly. Juxtaposing between these two arguments, which would you think was a better step by the DSS, inundating Nigerians that there is a ploy like this in place, or keeping away concrete information as the names of those that they claim they have identified?
I think the department is an intelligent organization. They work with intelligence and they have their networking. And so, like I said, like you have also said, I, for one, never expected the DSS to come out in the public to make such a statement without telling us the step taken. The statement would have contained.
Okay.
Including the fact they are not arrest now.
All right.
That the service have commenced engagement such as inviting some persons for interrogations, for conversations, for dialogue, and all of such. Not just only at the state headquarters, but across the country. By now, some stakeholders, key stakeholders would have been invited to engage, to talk with, and interact with the department in the state level, and by so doing, they would have been able to talk down, to suppress the such moves that will not augur well for this country. But just leaving it blank and only issuing like an advisory, what I saw for me was a mere advisory, and that you have gathered an intelligence. This is what is going to happen. You are advising the political class, the media group, and the CSOs. And I haven't done that. You are not actually telling us what you have done. So for me, I think the DSS, I believe within this week, more facts will unfold. More facts will unfold. I want to begin to see them doing more of engagement engaging everybody that is concerned, the political actors, the media groups, the society group. When that is done, you will be able to, rekindle hopes in the minds of Nigerians. You will also be able to win more confidence. I am sure that the department is on top of the matter, because I haven't come up with this statement as a matter of fact. It goes along with to show that they are on top of it. But I want them to go more than that, and by so doing, they will be able to appease the minds of those who are aggrieved, and let us also be able to be assured that that the department is on top of the situation. That's what I think would have been done. But having said this, I want to advise that the worst democracy is better than the best military government you would ever think of. I was among those who had been in the trenches in the 90s. We've fought the military out of democracy. We fought to regain democracy. I can tell you on my fingertips, I lost a couple of colleagues. I lost so many journalists, so many friends of mine who fought along with me and others to ensure that we have democracy. And so under democracy, you have freedom of press, you have freedom of movement, you have freedom of association, you have freedom to hold your opinion and to express it, you have freedom to own a medium to be able to disseminate your own opinion, you have freedom of religion, you have freedom of choice. The gains is just not, is just too much to enumerate. And so I will advise our political actors not to allow the outcome of the just concluded elections to make them to want to rock the boat and return us back to where we had come out from. We passed through a lot. This country, we lost a lot. We passed through a lot. We cannot afford to go back to where we had come out from. And my advice to them is they should explore every available opportunity, including that is the judiciary now, using the available judicial instrument to seek to get their grievances addressed, not going to the street to with intention to overrun the government, and not also going to the street with intention to stop the swearing in of those who have been elected. Let the democratic process run through. Go to court to seek redress. And again, the court here should also ensure that justice is done. They should look at the matters before them, and address them based on the fact available before them. They should not, take sides. They shouldn't take sides. They shouldn't also betray the confidence of these persons and of Nigerians.
Okay, it's interesting that you've brought in the legal wobbles that are likely to accompany the insinuations around the plot to install an interim government in Nigeria, because I'm just going through a statement issued by the Labour Party in response to the DSS report, and they have claimed that they will not be intimidated or blackmailed into abandoning a legitimate course. Part of the statement reads, as a party, we have submitted ourselves to pursuing the course of justice through constitutional means. It will not serve as the interest of democracy collapses in Nigeria. Apparently, this is a response to comments from the presidency that no court case would prevent the transition of power from the President Buhari administration to that of President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And so the position of the presidency is, even though there are grievances in court currently with respect to the just concluded election, no interim government will be in place. Bola Tinubu will be, sworn in come May 29, while the court cases can continue. Maybe the position of the DSS here is that some persons are trying to use court cases as well to prevent a transition of power from President Buhari to the president-elect, Bola Tinubu. Well, you may not be a lawyer, and we may just have to avoid the legal wobbles here, but from your position, is there anything wrong with trying to seek redress in court, for the conduct of the last election? So much so that you could have a court injunction to restrain the sitting president from swearing in the new one if there were, issues recognized or witnessed at the just concluded election. Is that, or does it amount to an unconstitutional act?
Well, like you rightly mentioned, I might not be a lawyer, but I'm old enough to tell you, and I have seen a lot of such encounters in the past. And I can assure you that in our constitution there is no such provisions of stopping the swearing in of a governor-elect or president-elect. It is not. I am not aware of any of such provisions. It's just like election stopping. It's just like stopping election to hold. There are some areas where there are some matters where the court cannot entertain. You have the right to. You can go to court to seek the legal interpretation of it. To seek a refuge from the court. But there are some areas where the court will not entertain, even when the case is filed, and such includes the fact that a court stopping the swearing in of the governor-elect, the swearing in of the president-elect. This area is the area I think the court might not actually entertain, that the court might lack the jurisdiction to entertain such a matter. And if it is, then it means that you would have been having a lot of crises in the state at the state level, where you will have a governor-elect not being sworn in because of a court order stopping the governor-elect. And we have had I think election in 1999. We had one in 2003. We had one in 2007. We had one in 2011. We had one in 2015. We had in 2019. And this is 2023. That is 7 elections we have had so far. I have never in the...
All right, having issues with connection to Franklin, whom we hope to have back in a short while. He's been bearing his thoughts on the alleged plot uncovered by the Department of State Services, DSS, who claim some identified persons, though unnamed, are plotting to put in place an interim government in the country, something they have said will truncate democracy, undermine the civil rule, and also bring about chaos in the country. There has been some level of response as well, largely divided as far as the latest from the DSS is concerned. The 2 leading parties in the country, the ruling APC as well as the People's Democratic Party, have both reacted to this in separate interviews yesterday. Respective spokespersons of these parties have urged the DSS to go after those who have been fingered with being responsible for planning to upstage civilian rule in the country and put in place an interim government, and also to name those that they feel are responsible for this. So we just got that bit of clarity from the position of Franklin a short while ago, who felt dissatisfied that the DSS has not given us names. But opinion in some quarters also feel the DSS should be quite discreet about its investigation in a matter that is clearly of urgent national importance. The next few days and weeks will be very interesting in terms of how the DSS goes about trying to unmask the faces behind the moves to put in place an interim government. Who are these persons? Well, if all of the parties are saying, well, we have no hand in this, and we're urging the DSS to carry out the investigations properly, then the question is, who is responsible for this? Well, we do have Franklin rejoin us back on Political Spectrum. Welcome back, Franklin, and go ahead with the points you were making before we go over to other areas. All right, we're still perhaps having issues connecting with Franklin. We'll still hope to get him back up properly so we could continue with that conversation. And just to remind you that later on, we'll also talk about the 10th Assembly and the race for the Senate presidency. We have Franklin back up, and he rejoins us on Political Spectrum. Welcome back, Franklin. And just to ask as well, the major political parties in the country have all responded to the claims made by the DSS about plans to install an interim government. The APC, the PDP, the Labour Party have all said, go after the unnamed faces and ensure that they do not succeed with their nefarious plans or activities. What do you think Nigerians, or how should Nigerians view this latest scenario with respect to what we saw at the just concluded elections? I mean, is there anything wrong in having an interim government in place, provided it is manned by civilians? With some saying an interim government is unconstitutional, but if it is actually, given on the orders of a court injunction, would you still describe it as unconstitutional? And again, if it is also manned by civilians and not the military?
Okay, let me tell you what happened. Let me just replay a little bit of history that led to the June 12th annulment. After the election of Moshood Abiola, a group known as Association of Better Nigeria, ABN, went to the court and obtained a federal high court order restraining the president, the head of state, from swearing in the president-elect Moshood Abiola. And because it was a planned thing, because the head of state had, that was in connival, was, had hashed the plan, or those within the head of those within the government had hashed the plan. They immediately used that as a leeway, as an opportunity to annul the June 12th. That is what happened. And so those who are coming up with this plan should remember that what happened in 93 might not happen now, because then you had a willing government, a government that was willing, that perhaps was the mastermind of the court order that restrained the swearing in of the president-elect. That was why the government was, had to cash in and cited the court order as the basis for which the election was, the president-elect Moshood Abiola was not sworn in. So in this case, you have a president who is a civilian president who is also willing to hand over. In the case of MK Abiola, the president, the head of state, Ibrahim Babangida, was not willing to hand over. And in this case of democracy, you have a tenure of office of 4 years. And in our constitution, there is no provision for interim national government. You do not have what should happen if the president-elect is not sworn in. What should happen in that gap is not mentioned in our constitution, because the drafters of our constitution never envisage a particular instance where the president-elect would not be sworn in. And so when that happens, any court that would grant such an order to restrain the swearing in of the president-elect would be putting the country into a very serious hurdle, and as well be making mockery of the judiciary. Because when you issue an order, you must understand that you want to solve a mischief. There is a mischief that you want to solve by issuing a court order. So that is why in the DSS release, they also advise the judiciary to be wary of the fact that when you make such an order that the president-elect shouldn't be sworn in, who then will you say should stand in the state of that gap until the matter is resolved? And in any case, there has never been a precedent. I have just told you from 1999 till 2019 till date. There is no precedent to rely upon on making such a judgment. You must be able to have a precedent that it happened in so year, and so this is what happened, or this is what the law says. When you make an order, this is what should happen. So I think that anyone planning to use the judiciary as scapegoat should be careful. And even the judiciary, by this particular warning by the DSS, I expect the Chief Justice of Nigeria to summon a meeting of all the men in the bench, and let them know the implication of such an action.
Well,
there is no provision.
It's interesting you've said. It's interesting you've said this, Franklin.
Rather, anybody should come to the court and seek redress while the swearing-in will take place.
I'd just like to ask as well, you've taken us down the course of history and rightly posited the scenario that gave birth to the annulment or the decision to annul the June 12 elections. And you've said it's not feasible in this current democratic dispensation. But I'd like to equally ask, while you have said it will be impossible for a court injunction to restrain the current administration from swearing in the new one or transiting power to the new one, we also know we could also have a court order that annuls this election. I mean, right now the case has been entertained by the Presidential Elections Petition Tribunal, which we expect to go right up until the apex court, that's the Supreme Court. So let's assume that we have a case where the Supreme Court annuls the February 25 presidential election, which saw the emergence of Bola Tinubu as president-elect. Now that will mean calling for fresh elections. And should that happen before the expiration of the tenure of President Buhari, what happens going forward? It's only a question of whether President Buhari would respect the Supreme Court's ruling. We've already seen cases of him disrespecting the apex court's judgment with a narrow redesign policy. So in the event that we have the court annul the presidential election and call for fresh polls, and it happens at the twilight of President Buhari's administration, at that stage, Bola Tinubu ceases to be president-elect. So what happens when such an impasse has been created?
I do not envisage such an impasse to be created. The matter in the Election Petition Tribunal will have to run up to Supreme Court level. At each instance, the first court of instance, in this case, the Court of Appeal, has 160 days to decide the matter. That is more than 3 months. And you have the swearing in May 29. So there is no how the court will immediately want to make a pronouncement, and that will affect the swearing in that is coming up in the next 2 months. The case has to run for at least 6 months, at least 160 days at the first court of instance, in this case the Court of Appeal. Then you now go to the Supreme Court, which is the final court of the land. By this time, we are looking at 6 months maximum. You have gotten a government in place. So whatever pronouncement that is made upon a government that is in place, is made to either affirm a government that is in place or annul the government that is in place. Now, in a case where the revise is the case, where the judgment is not in favor of the government in place, in this case, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, in the Constitution, the next person to step into the office is the Senate President. This case now is about the President who is enjoying ticket with the Vice President. Now, when the President is removed, along with his Vice President, the Senate President will now step into that office, will be sworn in by the Chief Judge. And there's a time frame to which the President, the Senate President acts in that office to be able to conduct a fresh election that will elect a president. And then the Senate President will now turn back to his office. In a case where you don't have the Senate President, the Speaker of the House of Reps will be sworn in. In a case where you don't have the President of the country is not there, the Vice President is not there, the Senate President is not there, the Speaker of the Reps is not there, you have the Chief Justice of Nigeria sworn in. So you can see that these are legal legal institutions that are established within the democratic confines. So I'm trying to say that there is no provision for interim government.
When you have following the chain of succession that you've just listed, right from the possibility of the absence of a president up until the chief judge, doesn't that amount to an interim government? I mean, from the word interim, it's just a temporary arrangement. So whether or not it's the Senate president or the speaker or the chief judge, it means the Constitution clearly makes provision for having an interim arrangement until a substantive leadership has been brought in place by a validly conducted election. So as you've said, assuming the Court of Appeal rules against the wishes of the APC standard bearer and President-elect Bola Tinubu, and then we have the expiration of President Buhari's administration, he leaves office, so does his vice president, and in the absence of, say, these two, you have maybe a Senate president or a speaker or the chief judge, as you have said. Doesn't that still amount to having an interim government in place?
No. We have two scenarios here. One is what you have now. You have the president and you have the president-elect. The president is to hand over to the president-elect, and that makes it the president-elect becomes the president. And when a government is formed, in May 29, whatever happened afterwards is within the envisaged constitutional democratic arrangement. That is the point I was trying to make. We are looking at what the DSS statement simply, warning against an attempt to stop the swearing in of the president-elect. Because when you don't swear in the president-elect, you don't have a president. You don't have any structure. What you have, you will only have someone who is neither not in any of the envisaged structure of the arrangement. So, like I have told you, there has never been any of such precedent from 1999 till the last election, which was in 2019, where any court of the land stop the swearing in of the president-elect or governor-elect. You need to allow them to be sworn in. Now, in a case where the Court of Appeal, which is the first court of instance for the presidential contest, makes a pronouncement, that the moment the other party file an appeal in the Supreme Court, that appeal automatically serves as a stay to the order that was made, or as a stay to the judgment that was made by the Court of Appeal. So like I had told you before, that the tribunal, the Court of Appeal, has 160 days to adjudicate and make pronouncement, after which the parties that are aggrieved can now move forward to the next court, which is the Supreme Court, to further press forward for their rights. But all of this would have had a government in place. So now it will now be the person who is now the president going to office, going to the court to defend the office that he is occupying. But right now, nobody is. He will have nothing. The president-elect will not be able to. Will not be the one. Will not be speaking. We are looking at a case where the president-elect is sworn in, and then governance is not, stagnated, and vacuum is not created when the tenure of President Buhari elapses on May 29. So, like I have told you, the DSS has done their job by coming out with the red alert and the warning. But I want them to go a step further by engaging the critical stakeholders, and let us begin to interact. Let's begin to engage. I have read the release of the PDP, of the APC, and of the Labour Party, and I believe that there is need for the state security services to go beyond just that making a statement, but to begin to interact, to begin to engage the stakeholders and then the parties that are involved. By so doing, you would have been able to arrest the situation. But be that as it may, I can assure you that anybody planning of interim government before May 20
All right.
in our constitution. That is what I think is the end thing as we speak.
Interesting. Well, since we've already factored in the National Assembly into this discussion, it's imperative that we discuss the 10th National Assembly, which would, of course, come in from June this year. And the race for the next Senate president is already begun in earnest, even before the inauguration of distinguished members of the 10th National Assembly. Well, it's no secret that interested candidates for the job have started intense lobbying. We're 3 months away from the inauguration of the 10th Assembly. And it's a Senate that, presents itself as a potentially diverse congregation of professionals, academians, technocrats, and entrepreneurs based on the results of what we saw in February 25, where you have parties like the Labour Party having 34 members across both chambers of the Assembly, the NNPP also having a good number of representatives as well, while the leading parties in the country, the APC and the PDP, equally have a large number of representatives. It's perhaps going to be one of the most polarized National Assemblies would ever have in this country. But the zoning of the position of the Senate presidency will largely depend on the ruling party, the APC. And there's been mooted talks about the position being zoned to either the Southeast or the South-South, so much so that we've seen the likes of former Abia State Governor Alleges come out to claim that it is his turn to become the Senate president. I wonder what you make of all of this, given the importance the legislature plays in governance here in the country. What are your views with reference to the lobbying, the intense lobbying we have seen as to who will become the next Senate president in the country?
Well, I think there is no need for the heated debate to take place. I have just mentioned precedent when I was speaking about the interim national government conversation. I mentioned the issue of precedent. And if you forget history, you will not be a good politician or a good political party. If you look at the history of our democracy from 1999 till 2019, you will agree with me that the Southeast have had their own share of the Senate presidency. We had the likes of Chiba Okadibo. Before then, we had Evans Ewerem. And then after Evans Ewerem, we had Chiba Okadibo. After Chiba Okadibo, we've had Ayimpa Osanyim and others, all emerging from the Southeast. A couple of them emerging from the Southeast. And so we've not had a South-Southerner testing the office of the Senate presidency. So it will be unfair for any political party to be thinking of zoning the office of the Senate president to an area that has produced a handful of Senate presidents in this particular democratic dispensation. So that is why I had said that it is the debate for who should be, it is shouldn't even arise in the first instance, because the Southeast enough from 2000 from 1999 they have been producing. So there is no need for them to even come up to lay claim to it. It is the turn of the South-South that have not tested the office before. I stand corrected. So I'm not. So among the look within the South-Southerners, who do you think can best be able to perform? Is what the party should do. Look between let's start from Akwa Ibom, Bayelsa, Delta, Cross River, Edo. You have the 6 states in the South-South. Look from the states, which among these states has the best, or that you think can actually offer the best of leadership. Then pick from there. But when you go to area where you have already produced, I think you'll be overloading the area with the office that they have already produced. So Senator Alleges is entitled to aspire for any office, just like any other person is entitled to aspire. But looking at the history, like I just told you, from 1999, you will agree with me that the Southeast have gotten.
Okay, was just having some connection issues there, talking to Franklin. We hope to have him back up so we continue with our conversation around the day's second big story. The intense lobbying taking place for the Senate presidency is gathering momentum with barely 3 months to go before the inauguration of distinguished members-elect of the National Assembly. We have Franklin Nsong back up. I'd just like to ask now, the President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu recently said he would favor competence over national unity in determining who constitutes the Federal Executive Council, with reference to the appointment he would make either as ministers, special advisors, ambassadors, or whatever capacity. Now, in view of that, should the subject matter of where the Senate President comes from supersede or precede, having a competent person who can direct the affairs of the legislative arm of government? Because everyone seems to be more bothered about where the Senate President should come from and not necessarily looking at their antecedents. A lot of the names that have sprung up from former governors, Alleges, Senator Godswill Akpabio, and a few others, including rumors that Ahmed Lawan is still very much interested in holding on to his position. Shouldn't we be bothered about the capacity of the individual in question and not necessarily where he or she hails from?
I don't know where you got the language from that Senator Ahmed Lawan is interested in holding his office. It is not his office. He does not own the office. First, the senators are first amongst equals. And by right, the office of the Senate President or leadership of the Senate should evolve from amongst the members. You do not have a party getting involved from outside. You shouldn't even have the president-elect getting interested. It should be a question of the members of the Senate sitting down amongst themselves and voting who they want. That, for me, should be the ideal thing in an ideal democracy. But because we are practicing political party democracy, where the political parties seem to hold sway, the party will be interested in who they want. But the party had already given us who they want at the primaries, that they elected who they want, and we have voted for who they wanted. Now going extra miles to begin to decide who they want to become the Senate President, who they want to become the Speaker, who they want to become this, is like demanding too much from Nigerians. That is why I have said before that our kind of democracy is a faulty democracy that revolves around political party. Nothing is said about the Nigerian. Nothing is said about the ordinary people of the country. All we are saying here is political party. What about the Nigerians that are suffering what the political party are bringing out as governance? That's the point. So I think that the ideal thing should be the 109 senators in their first session electing among themselves who they want to represent them, who they want to be their leader. When that is done, you will begin to see effective Senate, a Senate that is not a puppet, that is not tied to the apron string of the government of the federation. A Senate that will not be going cap and hand begging for favor from the president. A Senate that can call the president to order, because this is an arm of government that is independent of the executive. But as it were, it's as though the president of Nigeria controls the Senate and the House of Reps. That is why in most of the harsh policies of the government, you will not see the Senate and the House of Reps speaking against it, because they too are also afraid of running against their paymaster, running against their party. If you speak that way, the party could suspend you. And when the party suspends you, you may lose your seat on the floor. That is why I say we are operating a faulty system of democracy. Even when we copy it from America, copy it from Britain, we come to adulterate it with water and water it down and play it in our own version, and which is not the best for us. Now, having said this, I think, like I had said, that it is the duty of the members of the Senate and the members of the House of Reps, and this same goes down to the House of Assembly at the state level, to sit down among themselves and elect their leaders. Nobody should come from outside to elect leaders and impose on the National Assembly members or on the House of Reps members or on the Assembly members. That is what should be the ideal thing. Let them choose who they think among themselves is competent to lead them, because they are first among equals. If at the end of the day it favors Ahmed Lawan, so be it, because they all will cast their vote. Their vote will count. If it favored anyone else, it should be that their members voted the person in. You saw what happened when Saraki was the Senate president. Of course, you saw what happened. It wasn't a Senate that was being pushed over. It was a very robust Senate that was engaging, that did not allow the president to pocket them, that even issued subpoena to the president to appear before them, that even issued subpoena to anybody that they feel has not performed their function based on the laws that have been the laws of the land. That is what a Senate should be. And I can tell you that did not go down well with the government and the party. Because Saraki was an independent man who emerged, and you could even see him facing the ICPC. He was being dogged by the ICPC. Even as a Senate president, he was facing trial just because he was being firm and carrying out the function of check and balances, which is the core function of legislature.
So it leads to the question of what role the opposition is likely to play in all of this. I mean, the multi-party...
You got my point.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, the next question here is the multi-party representation that we're likely to have in the 10th Assembly means we could see a lot of horse trading. And that's why I asked, what's the role that the opposition is likely to play in all of this? Because while the APC remains the majority within the National Assembly, by virtue of the numbers they picked up in the just concluded election, the opposition equally garnered a good number of seats. And while it's the APC's duty, or as you've said, because these days we tend to play political parties politics, kind of politics, it means the party would determine where they want to zone the Senate presidency to and who is likely to be their favorite going forward. But you would also feel the opposition parties also have a role to play in all of this. Most of them would be approached and lobbied to support the choices that will likely be pushed forward by the APC. So do you feel the opposition equally have a massive role in all of this, or it's just going to be a one-way thing for the ruling party?
You know, right now, the opposition do not have the required number to counterbalance the ruling party. If you look at the number of senators elect, if you add all the numbers from the Labour Party, the PDP, the NNPP, and the rest, it may not give you the counterbalance. It may not give you, you have 109 senators, it may not give you half of that. And so when you look at 2/3 majority, I think it's still in favor of the ruling party. And so what the other parties will do is to align. And now, if we were to have election of the Senate President, the aspirants to the office of the Senate President have a duty to lobby the other parties, have a duty to lobby the PDP party, to lobby the NNPP, to lobby the Labour Party and the rest, because they need to shop for support to be able to show up to get the number. Because if you watch the conversation now, nobody is talking about somebody from the minority party becoming a Senate President. The argument is within the APC, because they are the ones that have the number. And in democracy, majority have their way, minority have their say. So the say that the minority will have in this case is to support the candidate that they think has lobbied them enough or has the capacity and capability and ability to lead them. And that is where lobbying, will be intense. But having said this, I still believe that we are now talking about the unity of the country. So political party should disappear from the enclave of National Assembly. We should be looking about the national interest. So when you are supporting a candidate to become the Senate President, look at the candidate, ability. Look at his content. Is he able to carry out the national interest along? Is he only coming to play his party card or being too partisan? This is what I think should guide the emergence of the new Senate President. It shouldn't just be a one-way thing. The parties could give you who they want, but you, as a minority party, you still have your say. You have your say by who you vote. You say if you add all these numbers together, if assuming the party chooses to zone their Senate seat to one of the zones, assuming, and then somebody from another zone is contesting against the zoning of his party, and then the person is able to lobby the minority parties, and then if you add the number that he will get from the minority parties to the ones he will get from his own party, he could even win the vote. So lobbying would not be intensified, but on the whole, what should be the guiding principle of who it becomes the country's Senate President should be one who has the interest of the nation at heart, one who is prepared and ready to serve Nigeria, not just to serve his party or serve his pocket. The one who is willing to serve the interest of Nigeria should be one that should be elected Senate President.
I also like to draw your attention to a rather pressing concern. We know that religious discourse formed a major part of the subject matters in the build-up to the just concluded election, especially since the All Progressives Congress, who won the election according to INEC, presented to Nigerians a rather controversial Muslim ticket of Bola Tinubu and Kashim Shettima as President and Vice President-elect, respectively. The disturbing reality here is that regional and tribal affiliations will likely and undoubtedly determine who perhaps becomes the next Senate President. Well, I won't ask you whether you feel it's a matter that, should be up for discussion anyway, because Nigerians will still talk about it regardless. There are those already saying you have a Muslim president-elect, you have a Muslim vice president-elect, and so the position of number 3 citizen in the country should likely be coveted by a Christian. Well, these are sentiments many persons would not want to whip up, but knowing how polarized Nigerian political system is, it's clearly going to be a matter up for discussion. I wonder if you think that factor would in any way equally determine who emerges as Senate President, taking into consideration the controversy surrounding the APC's Muslim ticket, which today stands as President and Vice President-elect respectively.
I think I will be speaking as a pan-Nigerian. There is need for us to balance the power. We need to balance power from all sectors, from the tribes, from religion, from the zone. That is why when I was doing my opening remark on this conversation, I told you that the Southeast had gotten their own turn of the Senate President, and I gave you names, beginning from Evans Nwurem to Chiba Okaribo to the rest, including Anyim Payotanyim and the rest. So I think that there is need for us to always be mindful of the areas that we zone offices to. Power. Though I don't believe in zoning, I believe in power sharing. Now, what we are saying now is sharing of power, because the government, give or take, has emerged already through the ballot. Now, even when that is a subject of a legal contention, that as you know, that is the case as it stands until the court says otherwise. And so you would not want to have a country dominant with one particular religion. You wouldn't want to have such a country where the president, the vice president, the chief justice of the country, and the senate president are all of one religion. And in a country such as ours, where you have ethnic and religious war, quote and unquote, because if you go to the north, look at how Catholic priests have been massacred. Look at how pastors have been, killed. Christian children were abducted from schools, made to, up to today. Some of them are still in the captive, like Leah Shaibu and the rest, for refusal to denounce their religion. And so, having this in your mind, you should be careful, even though that may not be the intent of the president or the vice president or the senate president or the chief justice of the country. You should not allow one religion to dominate over the other religion. Nigeria is not known to be a secular state where the country where the government is using the state fund to sponsor religious activity.
All right.
But when you begin to allow the country to be led by one religion, you are simply downgrading and reducing the other religions to zero. So there is need for you to balance power by allowing the other religion to also be given a place and a sense of belonging, and they should also feel the equity, the fairness that the country constitution preaches. Otherwise, it would have amounted to a breach of our constitution, a breach of the federal character arrangement that the constitution envisages, that you should be able to share power amongst the ethnic groups, amongst the region, amongst the religious belief. Because when you want to think about the issue of religion, when you have one religion occupying offices in government, the other religion will be seen as being rejected, and who protect their own interest. Here we are talking about politics. Politics is all about interest. Who speaks for them? Who defend them? So there is a need to balance the power by allowing someone from the other religion to also occupy the office of the Senate President and the Speaker of the House of Reps and other offices.
Interesting thoughts, and we're just going to have to leave it there. But thank you so very much indeed, Franklin Usong, for joining us on Political Spectrum today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Raymond.
All right, that was Franklin Usong, State Coordinator, CRAN, here in Akwa Ibom State, talking to us keenly about the two issues we looked at today. The claims by the DSS that it has uncovered names behind a plot to upstage the Constitution and put in place an interim government in the country, things they say would amount to a rebellion and chaos across Nigeria, and they have said they would ensure it doesn't happen. So a transition of power from President Buhari to President-elect Bola Tinubu is pending. While, of course, the race for the 10th Senate presidency continues, as the big wigs within the rank and file of the All Progressives Congress have been engaged in intense lobbying to see who will be the next Senate president in the country. Matters will likely revisit as we go on, but that will be when next we come your way for another edition of Political Spectrum. Thanks for joining us. Blyden Okem is up next with Business 360, but I'll be back again tomorrow. Join me again if you can. From me, Raymond Ita, and the rest of the crew, thanks for watching. Bye for now.